Hi guys, in today's discussion of the book India That Is Bharat by Sai Deepak, we get into what motivated him to take up this gigantic civilizational project. If you grew up in the 1990s in a middle-class Hindu family in southern Bharat, not to perpetuate stereotypes, but chances are that a career in engineering or medicine featured right at the top of your life goals. My goals were no different, not just because of my limited means and exposure, but also because I was keen on pursuing a career in aerospace engineering. However, eventually, I had to settle for a mechanical engineering and committed myself to performing well so that I could pursue a master's in aerospace engineering. By the time I reached the end of the 6th semester in mid-2005, I was well placed to start a career in the core manufacturing sector in the event I failed to secure admission to a good aerospace program. Just when it seemed like I had it all figured out, I started having second thoughts about what I truly wanted to do in the long run. This introspection was partly triggered by my visits to Ramakrishna Mutt, the writings of Swami Vivekananda, Dr. Arun Shori's incisive and piercing books, and the spike post the elections of May 2004 in the normalized and open hostility directed at specific Indic sub-identities, especially on academic campuses. Had it not been for the writings of Swami Vivekananda and Dr. Shori, I would have missed the forest for the trees, since it was evident that the hostility, while on the face of it was directed at specific Indic sub-identities in the name of societal reparation, it was in reality meant to weaken the larger Indic civilizational edifice. Systematic isolation, ostracization, and acculturation of one Indic strand at a time seemed to be at play. It became clearer with each passing day that this hostility had the previously tacit but increasingly overt support of extra-civilizational, specifically colonial and non-Indic systems that stood to benefit from this motivated internecine tussle. Thanks to my interactions with better-informed people who were civilizationally rooted and had worked on the ground, I gradually came to understand that while the instinctive human reaction would be to protect the sub-identities one was closest to, the priority should be to preserve the civilizational tapestry and its foundations which enable the birth, growth and expression of diverse sub-identities. This also meant that protection of Indic civilizational integrity did not require the submergence of its sub-identities at the altar of a well-intentioned, albeit misplaced, grand unity project. On the contrary, history seemed to teach us that the survival of the Indic civilization as a civilization depended on the flourishing of its sub-identities, with each of the sub-identities realizing that they were part of a federal, symbiotic whole, and that it was in their own existential interest to remain part of that whole. I also learned that the tumultuous and fissiparous state of affairs that met the eye was the product of sustained long-term investment at a very fundamental level much before 1947. Therefore, it required at the very least an equally sustained long-term investment by the society at the most fundamental levels, namely the group and the individual, in order to undo the damage sustained by this living civilization. This realization had a profound effect on me. However, I was not remotely sure of the path I had to take. Any drastic change in career paths required me to take the immediate family into confidence and convince them of my decision, and rightly so, because I had not given them the slightest inkling that I was going through a churn. But before breaking it to them, I wanted to be sure of the path myself, and so I spent the 7th semester evaluating a career in civil services and alternatively the law. In early 2006, in my final semester, I had the opportunity to present a technical paper at the IIT Kharagpur. That is when I learned that the institution was all set to inaugurate later that year a unique 3-year LLB program with an inbuilt specialization in intellectual property rights under the auspices of its newly established law school, the Rajiv Gandhi School of Intellectual Property Law, RGSOIPL. What made the 3-year law program unique, apart from its marked tilt towards intellectual property law, was the fact that it was open exclusively to the scientific and technological pool of the country. I realized that my future lay in the field of law, which I believed would equip me with the skills I needed to act on my convictions. In July 2006, a month after my undergraduation, I joined the program after clearing the admission process for the IIT Law School. Although I had no known relatives who were part of the legal fraternity, and I did not know much about the profession and its inner workings, the only thing I was sure of was my interest in litigation. Despite the specialized nature of the program and my aptitude for intellectual property law, upon my graduation in July 2009, I was recommended by the advisor to the law school to pursue a career in constitutional law. In fact, he was kind enough to write a letter recommending me to a senior advocate in the Supreme Court, who had then just been appointed as one of the top law officers of the country. Though I loved constitutional law, my personal commitments required me to take up commercial litigation. So I started off as a civil commercial litigator in a National Capital Region-based law firm that specialized in intellectual property litigation and allied areas and practiced primarily before the High Court of Delhi. For the first 7 years of my career as a litigator, until mid-2016, while intellectual property law and competition law were my core practice areas, I was given the opportunity to work on a few landmark matters that involved significant questions of constitutional import. In 2010, I was second chair for Greenpeace India in Tata Sons Limited versus Greenpeace International and ANR. Tata Sons had sued Greenpeace International and Greenpeace India in the High Court of Delhi for alleged trademark infringement and defamation, citing Greenpeace India's use of the Tata logo in its Pac-Man-style game Turtle vs. Tata. The High Court's judgment in this case, while dismissing Tata's prayer for interim injunction on the game, laid down the law on the interplay between trademark law, the law of defamation, and the right to parody and fair comment as part of the fundamental freedoms of speech and expression under the Constitution. This judgment remains one of the finest in its genre to date and is appreciated for its nuance and clarity.